Right, it's lovely to see you all here onto one of the more historic islands on Lough Erne. My name is Nigel Irvine. You all will realise this is Irvine's island, no relation to mine, but there is a relation here in the audience tonight who will be talking all about it. To give you a brief overview of what's happening, we have three fabulous speakers here tonight and one really mediocre one. Okay? Unfortunately, the mediocre one is me, and I'm up first. So once I'm out of the way, I can say, I guarantee you're in for a good night. Okay? We have a lot to go through. The speakers that we have are really very knowledgeable in their own subject matters. We've only 15-20 minutes each. Okay, so if we could ask you to keep the questions to the end of each section, we'll have one or two questions at the end. There's a break in the middle after we get two of the speakers done, okay, and then there's two more speakers after that. And then there'll be time for more questions and hopefully answers after that. Okay, so I'm up first, and I'm going to give you a presentation on Lough Erne Wildfowling. But just before I get into the depths of that, what Hazel was referring to is there's a desk over there with a load of files on it, 6 or 7 files. And over the years, as I've seen things and downloaded stuff from the internet, I've sort of built up a glossary of items about particular islands. What pricked my imagination maybe 10 years ago was there's a book over there in the window there, you probably see it, and you can take a look at it at the break. And it's a history, or a little journey from Ballyjanesduff to Ballyshannon, okay, written by 2 locals. And it's basically a history of the lake. And I thought, that's interesting. So we've got the book, and it's all about the social architecture, history, and so on. I thought, well, what about all the different islands? It had identities, and it had information on some of the islands. But what I thought about was we have one river system which starts here and ends here, and there's nothing really on each of the individual islands between the source and where it eventually folds into the Atlantic Ocean. So I took on the wee interest, and it's only an interest, it's a hobby, of trying to find out a little bit about each of the islands, some of which I've got and trapped and are in the folders, and you're able to hopefully see a little bit about that. But certainly there's a huge job of work to be done recording something on each of the islands, and a lot of it unfortunately isn't written down, it's in people's heads, okay, and people are getting older, and we have a limited time available now to try and trap all the information and the stories and the tales that are doubtless about every island that's on the lake. Okay, so that's what Hazel was referring to earlier when we had our session in Fermanagh House. So some of the files are over there, and you can take a look at it. Okay, but the main reason I'm here is to tell you a little bit about wildfowling on Lough Erne. Can you see? Can we dampen some of the lights, maybe? Switch off some of the ones at the front so we can see it a little bit better. Okay, that's very dark, perfect. That desk, keep one on. Yep, that's it. Right, hopefully you can all see that. And I'm going to talk very quickly on wildfowling on Lough Erne. Okay, it's wildfowling on the Lough Erne. Who's in charge of it in terms of the Lough Erne Wildfowlers Council? What do we do? And what are our conservation activities? Okay, so wildfowling, as I'm sure you recognise, it's one of the earliest forms of hunting. It dates back many, many thousands of years. Today, wildfowling is a legal pursuit of water-based species, and it's usually carried out with the use of a shotgun, smooth bore. It was once a profession, okay, and not that long ago it was a profession, but now it's been carried out by about 300 or so local individuals, upper and lower lake. And they are mostly from the rural community. They've grown up in and around the foreshore on the islands, and it has been part of their history and heritage, and they continue it on. And we have an average age now of about 62 years of age, our members, and it increases every year. The average gets higher, fortunately. So it'll only be a matter of time before that, as the sport slowly diminishes. As I said, it's carried out on Lough Erne, designated areas on the foreshore and around the islands, and it's a traditional activity, okay, within the province here, and it's practiced locally by many generations of all social classes. So the history of wildfowling. The first recorded reference to wildfowling that I've been able to find dates back to July 1689, And there was a siege at Crum. There were several sieges at Crum Castle in that time, and it was at the Battle of Newtown Butler, where there were Crichton's militia and the Enniskillens were defending Crum Castle, and Viscount Galmoy and his local regiments were attacking the Crum Castle. Now what they found was the Enniskillens didn't have much artillery, but what they did have were muskets. And what they found was the muskets were actually modified and were called fowling pieces. So they were matchlock rifles in those days, but they had an extended barrel, and they were mostly used for shooting duck in Lough Erne. Now what happened was Galmoy came up over Crum Castle, was looking out across an island. His second in charge was with him, having a little glass of wine and toasting to the siege that they were having, when out came a shot from the castle, broke the glass, the wine glass that his second in charge was holding, and they realised that maybe the siege wasn't just going to be that easy after all. So they retreated back out of shot length from Crum Castle. Okay? So the first recorded wildfowling incident, unfortunately in today's you would have to record it as an incident, was when the defenders of Crum Castle shot using wildfowling pieces back in 1689. Okay, so what is the LEWC? LEWC is a Wildfowlers Council. There are 8 local clubs, and we manage the sport and activity of wildfowling on behalf of the Department of Infrastructure here in Northern Ireland. What do we actually do? Well, we manage and administer the wildfowling in terms of the issuing and sale of permits. You have to have a permit to shoot in Lough Erne. You have to have insurance. Okay, and you can't buy one without the other, so we manage the administration really of that on behalf of the local government department. We issue permit sales annually, we raise revenue, and that revenue is then reinvested into conservation activities. We have a code of conduct for our members, a wildfowling code of conduct, and we report any monitoring incidents for the PSNI, okay, across the year. We try to promote the positive aspects of wildfowling, and we engage in significant conservation activities. Okay, so what are those conservation activities? Well, there are a number of them. We have a breeding wader project, which we've been doing for 5 years now with the assistance of Lough Erne Landscape Partnership and the National Lottery. We do duck nesting tunnels, which some of you may have seen on your journeys up and down the lake. We have annual and biannual litter picks, and we also do wardening activities on both upper and lower Lough Erne. So the nesting tunnels, you may have seen those when you're out and about. They're obviously tunnels for ducks to breed in, safe areas which cannot be predated. A big problem we have obviously on Lough Erne is predation, not just by birds but also of mink. Mink understand that there's a ready-made dinner now. They understand there's a ready meal just sitting waiting whenever they see those tunnels. So they actually swim out to them, go up the pole, and can have a dinner of between 10 and 12 eggs. Okay, so we had to find out a way of making the tunnels predator proof, and with the help of LELP, Lough Erne Landscape, we were able to modify all of the tunnels that we have out there. Okay, so when did the tunnels start? Well, there was an idea spawned in America, in the US in the 1920s, came over here in 2006, initiated by the Devonish Wildfowlers, the local club down Enniskillen here. We won a conservation award in 2007 across the UK with the concept of it and getting it actually up and running in the UK. We were recognised with the National Wildfowl Conservation Award. There are 3 clubs within the council doing the Nest Tunnel project, and we're assisted by a number of organisations who sponsor or give us money, basically. We buy poles, we buy netting, get straw and hay, petrol for the boats to go out and install them. Currently we've about 70 tunnels dotted between Killyhevlin and Devonish. Okay, some of them you'll see, and some of them we deliberately want you to see in very prominent areas so people can see and understand, but most of them you won't see because they're back in bays and back in areas where there's very little disturbance. So most of the tunnels you won't actually see. Okay, every year we have to renovate the actual tunnel. Most of them are surrounded in straw. The straw gets blown out by the wind, or the tunnels can be flooded in the winter time. Those on the upper lake get flooded, okay, because you can only have your tunnel so much above the water. If you're too high, the duck won't come into it. But if it's within the rise and flow of the flood waters, some of them will actually get flooded. But every year, prior to springtime, we go out and our members go out and renovate the tunnels by putting in new straw and resetting the hay inside. And obviously they're affected by severe weather conditions, floods and ice. Back in 2008, 2009, we had a lot of tunnels destroyed because when the ice started to melt, literally ice sheets were moving down the lake and it took everything with them. So it uprooted quite a few of our tunnels. So some of them we found, most of them we didn't find, so we had to replace them all back at that stage. So in 2006 we started off with 5 or 6 tunnels, and over the years we've added more and more tunnels after that. Okay, so where are the tunnels, roughly speaking? There are 70 of them, dotted from around Killyhaviland, Denny's Loop. If any of you are familiar with that, you'd see quite a few in there, and then on down past Devonish, okay, and on the foreshores below that. So from the 70 tunnels, the reason we do this is to make sure that the sport that we love and enjoy is sustainable. And what we generally find is with the tunnels, you get 2 sittings each season, each breeding season. The first sitting, generally on average now, we've got about 85% occupancy on the first sitting. On the second sitting, we get about 30% occupancy. Okay? So we monitor how many of the tunnels are used and how often they're used. Generally, a duck will lay about 10 eggs, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, but if you take an average of about 10 eggs per batch, okay, so 60 tunnels, 10 eggs, that's 600 chicks fledged. 20 tunnels in the second sitting, 200 more, so that's about 800 chicks actually fledge, okay, when we have no predation. We had predation for 1 or 2 years, and that was when the mink actually started to understand that these nest tunnels had their ready-made dinners sitting waiting. So they actually went and hunted them out, and they knew that whenever the tunnel was there, they saw us going out, we refreshed the tunnel, they knew there would be a duck in there. So there were some of our tunnels hit 2 and 3 times, and simply because the mink could crawl up the wooden pole and get access into the tunnel itself. So the only way we could avoid that was by replacing all our tunnels and fitting them with galvanised steel poles. So the mink can't actually climb steel. The claws can't get purchase on the steel. So automatically it couldn't climb into the nest tunnel itself. And that has drastically reduced the level of predation that we were having on our tunnels, and has brought the project back into success again. Okay. Operation Duck Tunnel, with the help of LELP again, we brought people out round Devonish Island, hired the various cruisers that are out there, brought 3 groups out on one particular occasion, school group, then a charity group, and then open to the public, okay, a couple of years ago. That was after COVID, after the first batch of COVID. So we try and introduce our friends and neighbours and locals to what the wildfowling community actually does. Okay, litter picks. Every year, somewhere along either upper or lower Lough Erne, we carry out litter picks. It's not your usual litter pick. This is on the foreshore of the mainland and on the foreshore of all the islands. Okay, Devonish Wildfowlers, for example, have been doing litter picks every other year since the early 80s. Okay, and speaking to the fellas in the council, okay, on each of the occasions in the last couple of years, we've been collecting over a tonne of material each time we go out. Now, please bear in mind, this is bagged up on a foreshore, which is extremely inhospitable in terms of getting about, access, collecting the litter. We put it into boats and we bring it back to an area where the council will collect it. So all those bags, that was one sitting, and that was just over 1.1 tonne of material collected by half a dozen, maybe 10 volunteers, out from maybe 10 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. Okay, and we repeatedly do that every other year, and there's litter, about a tonne every other year. We're only limited the amount that we can collect by the number of volunteers that come out and help us. Okay? So that litter is collected usually below Enniskillen and down to the Ballinmallet River. So there's one section of Lough Erne which really gets polluted. And that's because there's the litter which comes in from around the town, it's blown in off the streets, whatever, plastic bottles, floats down. Around the town there's a good race of water. Everything gets carried down, it gets down into the Broad Lough. The race slows off, the material floats up, and then the prevailing wind comes in from the southwest and blows it all onto the foreshore at Trory and Trory on down. So over the years we found out that if we want to make the best effort of our time and the people we have, if we focus on that one area, that's where we consistently gather the most litter, and it's most worthwhile in terms of clearing the rubbish from the lake. So that's the litter picking activity. A few more different photos. You see Devonish in the background. Those are the type of boats that we use. We load them up with plastic bags and bins and barrels and ADF drums and oil drums and bins, wheelie bins. Anything that floats will generally float down past Enniskillen and then drift over to the northeast foreshore. Wardening activities, well, because all of our members are out and about, we have wardening evenings where we train the guys and the ladies to keep their eyes and ears open, what to spot, and if they do see something, how to report it. So of our 300 members, okay, there are a lot of people out on the lake over the winter time, which used to be very quiet on the lake. In the last couple of years, the winter's almost just as busy as the summertime, okay, with boats and cruisers and central heating and this and that and all the modern luxuries that you have in your cruisers today to go out at any time of the year. Okay, so used to be a quiet period in the winter time, it's not anymore. Okay, but there are still incidents happening. Then Bow Island Wader project, I know I'm going on here, I need to finish this up. One of the big projects that we did through LELT was we secured funding from the Heritage Lottery scheme for a project for 5 years. This was on the breeding wader programme on Bow Island. The Wildfowling Council, LEWC, had been carrying out a project for about 4 or 5 years before that. Okay, we started in 2014, and that was looking at breeding waders, trying to understand how to control the habitat and improve the habitat for all types of waders. So locally we had started that project for 5-6 years. The National Lottery came along, the Heritage Programme came along, and they gave us funding to properly do that for 5 years. And over the last 5 or 6 years, as it was with COVID and so on, we're now starting to wind down that project. Okay? But there's a per gentleman here who tomorrow will be giving, tomorrow isn't it? In the castle, will be giving a very informative talk.
Oh, it's riveting, mate.
I'm sure it is. It was the last time. Okay, and that's on tomorrow afternoon. So Michael will tell you all about what was happening with our breeding wader programme. Okay, I'll not run into the detail there, but it was for different species of wader: lapwing, curlew, redshank and snipe were all involved. And it focused on an area, 3 areas, sections of Bow Island, just across from Lusty Beg. On the Bow Island side of Lusty Beg was in terms of the habitat we worked with there. So that funding, that project was funded by different partners: Heritage Fund, the Wildlife Habitat Trust, Lough Erne Landscape, and then the Department for Infrastructure. Okay, any income that we get from permits, we reinvest that back into conservation activities. On the Upper Lake, there's also actually a breeding wader project in and around the Knockninny area. Okay, and one of our wildfowling clubs has activity up there, very successful activity around 8 islands. So what we started off on Bow Island with the council, okay, which has 8 clubs. One of those clubs on the Upper Lake has started their own breeding wader project for 8 islands in what they see as their portion of the Lough. So the project is now growing across Lough Erne in terms of breeding waders. And that is the end of my piece. Any quick questions? Yeah.
How do you deal with the inbreeding, for example, in the ducks? I mean, you go down to the Rhino and they're pretty crazy down there, irrespective of your boxes and so forth, out there up and down the river.
Yeah, well, the towny ducks, we call them towny ducks because they're in and around the town. It can be a good thing and a bad thing. There's nothing nicer on your dinner plate than a good fat towny duck because they're fed on bread. okay, consistently unbred, okay, and then when they go out around the area, you can usually see them because they're flying lower and they're much easier to shoot. I'm joking. Right, look, the ducks go in there for a reason, and it's because they get fed. Okay, and ducks are very gregarious. Okay, they come in packs, and they arrive in packs and depart in packs. So we can't actually control what they do. They're still a wild animal. Okay, what we try to do with the tunnels is, and the reason we focused around the Enniskillen area is because that's where the most pressure is from predation, be it rats or cats or dogs. Okay, in and around the town. So ducks are ground nesters. Okay, there's huge pressure in and around the town on a nest on the ground, not just from magpies and crows and things, but from four-legged critters. So they really have a hard time breeding on the ground in and around the town. So that's why a lot of our tunnels are specifically in and around that area. Okay, so we can't do anything with them breeding or whatever. They're wild animals, but we can help them sledge their young by giving them somewhere safe and secure. Okay.
How many ducks does the Wildfowlers Association kill in a season?
Yeah, generally across it, we have our own bag returns, and each member shoots. Every year we have to record exactly what they shoot. And I administer the bag returns. I'm secretary of the LAWC, so I see what each and every club, okay, bring in and what they say they shoot. Now, if you go back 4 or 5 years, it used to be around 3,000 ducks per season, and now with less and less wildfowlers coming through, it's down to just over 2,000 per season. And those are mallard. You know, there's several species, different species of ducks out there. But all of those ducks are coming in from somewhere else. They're not necessarily breeding here. So what we're doing with the nest tunnels is actually restocking our native ducks. Okay? Ducks generally come in to breed here, and they're coming from areas in Northern Europe and Eastern Europe, okay, where it's very, very cold. The winters haven't been cold, there's less ducks coming in. So the biggest threat to the population of ducks actually here is global warming, because it's not forcing ducks west to warmer areas to breed. They can stay where they are and breed. If they don't have to leave, please, they won't leave. Okay, they breed where they are. Yep.
What species other than mallard do you get in the tunnels?
All mallard.
Just all
Okay,
mallard?
yeah, well there's teal, okay, and tufties, and there's 6 or 8 different types of duck on Lough Erne,
Yeah.
but these are generally specific to mallard. Okay, and that's because the mallard is it's almost the most domesticated type of duck. Okay, when you look at the widgeon and the teal, they really are wild. They're coming in from Scandinavia, they're coming in from Iceland. They're a wild animal. Some mallards stay here all year, most will go back and forward. But in the tunnels, it's always mallard.
The reason is because the diving ducks, their feet are much further back, they're not as agile, and they can't get into the tunnels like the mallard can. The mallard could turn 360, but the other diving ducks, that's why they generally breed on the ground, because they don't walk well.
Right. Tell me, do you have any ringing activities to monitor our population and migration studies?
Not of duck. Okay, I know you're a member of the BTO, isn't it? And a very, very enthusiastic member of the BTO, and have done ringing in the past.
Yeah.
We don't, but yeah, Nigel, maybe if you want to.
Well, one of that's a really good point. Well, I suppose being I'm BTO rep for Fermanagh as well, so I know a wee bit about this. BTO coordinate ringing obviously of species of birds all over Britain and Ireland. So there's quite a lot of movement of ducks. What Nigel's talking about, ducks leaving Northern and Eastern Europe in the winter time. They bred up there, come further south. So we would have records of mallard and teal, particularly from other parts of Europe here in Fermanagh. But one of the key things with our breeding breeder project is we have a lot of snipe in Fermanagh in the winter time. If you're talking to Trevor, there's quite a lot of snipe arrive here, quite a urban side in the winter time. One of the things we're keen to do is working with our kind of partners, Give Away to Conservation Trust. We're going to actually put satellite tracks on snipe this winter in Fermanagh as part of an overall project across these islands, some in Cornwall, some in Scotland. And we're hopefully going to build up some data then as to where our winter snipe come from. And we suspect our winter snipe may well be Icelandic, but it's very interesting to see. To give you one thing, they try to stop them with snipe here, but they did a pilot study this year down in Cornwall, south of England. Put one of these little packs at the back of the snipe, kind of your think 2 grams in weight. They assumed these snipe would all head back to mainland Europe, and they discovered no, one of the snipe was wanting to head north, and it headed north, and it landed on the mountain above Glencower Lough in May, so it almost landed from on its way back, and then went on to Iceland. So we might think that all our snipe here are Icelandic snipe, but we might find it Russian snipe or Scandinavian snipe, so it's going to be a really interesting project, and that's one of the outcomes of Lough, one of the legacies that we'll build on for years to come, and I'd like to do that with ducks when we get there, it's smooth.
Right.